Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Aiza. I'm a computer science graduate from LUMS, currently in the UX graduate program at Purdue. I'm a global lead for the ambassador program for Pakistani Women in Computing and an aspiring product manager. So, as someone that has been interested in the product space myself, I'm really excited for this session. So, the focus of our conversation today is to understand the different management tracks in tech and kind of answer some questions that are very frequently get asked during career transition, relating to figuring out the right role, what skill sets are needed, what the most exciting and challenging parts of these roles are. So with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Sheeba Malik, who is a senior engineering program manager at Apple. Hi, Sheeba.
Hi, Aiza.
We have Alishba Khawaja, who is a product manager at Microsoft. Hello, Alishba.
Hi, Aiza.
And we have Omar Shahid, who is an engineering manager at Facebook. Hi, Omar. Glad to have you. So thank you all for joining us, panelists. Really glad to have you all here. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend around 10 minutes with each panelist and kind of try to get an understanding of their role and track before we move on to sort of more generic questions. We will have some time for Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment them and we can get back to them. So let's begin the session. So Omar, we can start with you. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing right now, what your previous experience has been, and how did you get to this role?
Sure. So I'm currently working as an engineering manager at Facebook. I've been in this role for over 5 years now. As a title, though, I've been in different teams while I've been working at Facebook. Currently, I'm leading a team called Public Connection, which works on all of the public conversations that you see in Facebook. Like then, some of these, like as probably some people are seeing on pages as a product. And like if you think about public space, it's about public figures, celebrities, creators, businesses. So we focus on experiences for these larger public entities and how they come to the platform and use it. Previously, I've been at Microsoft, and before that, I've been at Bentley Systems in Islamabad. And I've done my grad school from Florida on a Fulbright scholarship, and my undergrad from FAST. So that's like a quick intro of where I've been. I've been in different roles as well. I've like started as a software engineer, then went to management, then actually started doing software engineering again as an individual contributor and back to management right now.
Great. Thank you. That's really interesting to hear. So what sort of, you're in engineering management, and then you mentioned you were a software engineer before as well. So what kind of made you transition towards this role? Why did you choose to come to this role?
And I think the first transition was relatively more organic. Like when I was in Bentley Systems, like a path to, I would say, growth in many companies is going from an IC to manager, and that's how the career progression happens. But when I got to US, I started going back into doing engineering, and part of that was I wanted to learn more about building services at scale and how these companies operate, and actually polish my skill set as well. And then I started getting involved and leading different projects and teams, and got back into doing management. And part of that is that I enjoyed doing it, especially the part where you think about how to coach and mentor people and how to help them with their own career growth. I think like that's one of the things that kind of got me excited into doing it again.
Right. Yeah. So when you were kind of making that transition, what are some skill sets that people that normally that do make that transition offer you, that you think the strengths one needs to have to kind of make that shift?
Right. I think like for an engineering management position, it's a relatively, I would say, mix of skill set. You need to have technical skills. I think like I'd hardly know anyone who hasn't been a software engineer and doing engineering management. So you definitely need good engineering skills to be able to do system design and coding, and to be able to review code, understand how teams are making progress. Some of this is thinking about costing. Let's say if you have a project in hand, how do you estimate time and move on with it? So the technical skills are very key to this role compared to other management roles that you would hear. And then the other part is obviously people management comes with a wide set of skills like coaching, career growth, performance management. And then there's another side of it which is more similar to what other roles do as well, is like getting involved in project management. How do you kick off a project? How do you track progress? How do you figure out what are blockers or risks and mitigate them? And then there's collaboration piece to it as well, because you work with a lot of different functions. And when we say functions, I guess I should probably clarify that too. Like within, like in larger companies, you have a lot of different functions like product design, content strategy, product management, product marketing, data analysis. So there's a lot of different functions that we work with, and it requires a bunch of collaboration skills too.
Mm-hmm. So as an engineering manager, like what exactly is sort of your role? You talked about like a lot of these things, but what is it that you're kind of really managing?
Right. I think like the core of this is to manage an engineering team, and like especially in the tech sector, when you see the engineering team is often the largest part of what we're doing. It's the like basically the output of the company comes through the engineering team, what they're building eventually, right? So that's where a lot of manpower is employed as well. So you're kind of leading the trajectory of what the company delivers. You manage how efficiently you can actually run that team so that you can deliver the most output and help the company move forward quicker. And as I said, like the broader role just includes people management, project management, system design, and collaboration. So those are like, I think like the top parts that you get involved in.
Okay. Thank you. That kind of really helps understand what the role entails. So moving on to you, Sheeba, can you tell us a bit about your role and what you've been doing?
Right. So my name is Sheeba. I'm working at Apple as engineering program manager. I'm mostly working in the first party org within Apple. I've been doing project program management for over 20 years now, and I worked with all sorts of companies. I worked for small startups, small organizations, multinationals, as well as big corporations. Also, when I started my journey, I worked in Pakistan, traveled to a few different regions in the world before settling down in the United States and working here. So in those 20 years, I've done all sorts of work. My background is computer science, and I'm actually a graduate of FAST Islamabad. And, I'm also on the board for FAST North America chapter here. So if there are FASTians watching out there who are not connected to Fauna Network, please reach out. I would love to connect with, because we have, amazing network of professionals here. I'm also a volunteer for PWiC and Open Silicon Valley.
Great.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just wanted to give a little bit introduction, and I'm going to let you ask the next question.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you to kind of like if you can tell us more about your role, what you kind of have been doing as a program manager.
So talking about the role of project manager, and I think it will become very clear if I give you an example. This example is literally out of PWiC, which is the book which is published by Program Management Institute. But think of a project manager as, we'll take the example of an orchestra. So, a modern orchestra consists of like 100 musicians, which play about, 18 to 25 different musical instruments. And when you think of an orchestra, there are two things that come to mind. One is, the magnificent harmony that exists between such a large group of musicians. And, of course, the orchestrator, which is also called the conductor, who's shaping, the musical interpretation by his or her gestures in order to produce a compelling piece of performance. So, there's a lot of planning that goes into setting up an orchestra. There's a lot of things that the conductor is responsible for, including, the quality of sound, the accuracy, which has to do with making sure everybody is hitting the right notes and rhythms. There's this aspect of tempo and dynamics, which has to do with speed and volume, and there's an emphasis on pacing, and there are a lot of other things. And the reason I gave this example is because just like that, project manager is responsible for delivering a perfect project. What does that mean? It essentially means the project needs to be delivered, within time, within budget, within scope, on time. And as a project manager, you need to make sure that everybody is aligned in terms of project objectives. Now, as a project manager, you're dealing with sometimes very large group of people who are very, very skilled in what they do. They're subject matter experts in their own domain. But as a program manager, you have the bigger picture. You know what it takes to deliver this project end to end. So what that means is that you have to be an excellent communicator because number one, you're dealing with so many stakeholders as a part of that project. You have to communicate vertically, horizontally, at all levels. You need to be an excellent collaborator, as Umar had mentioned, just because there are so many teams involved. And you need to make sure that, you are helping people move forward. If there are roadblocks, you're able to remove them for them, come to their level and understand what the issues are and help out with them. You also need to be at the same time very good influencer and strategizer. Reason being, when you're dealing with this large group of people, there are many personalities at play. And with personality, there comes in conflict. And you got to be, as a program manager, be able to resolve those conflicts, keep people focused, and keep them moving forward. You got to be an excellent problem solver because 9 out of 10 times people will only come to you with issues. So you got to be ready to be able to listen to them and ask the right questions and to be able to solve those issues for them. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it definitely does. And, I think you talked about sort of that you need to be an influencer. So kind of just like on that note, there is like, with the different roles, there's like a different management style. So kind of on that, what is the difference between leading with authority versus leading with influence? And then, how do you sort of lead really?
So, this when you say program manager, this is actually a position of power, right? You've been given a lot of empowerment to make decisions, and you are making decisions at every part of the project. What that means is that it comes with a lot of responsibility as well. You have to be able to make decisions the right way. You need to be able to guide people the right way. And a lot of time, you need to just kind of be able to put your egos on a side because and focus on the common goal. So there are conflicts that come up, and I think the focus needs to be what's the common goals that kind of aligns everyone and keep them focused towards it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I think sort of like moving to you, Alishba, you're like a product manager, and then product kind of, gets really, it runs really closely with program when people are sort of trying to decide between roles. So can you kind of help us understand, what your role is, what you've been doing?
Yeah, of course. So I would like to say that you can think of a product manager as like a mini CEO of like a product, right, or feature that you're delivering. So essentially, when I think about what a product manager do, I would think about what a product lifecycle is, right? And there are key aspects to it. So based on when you're joining a product, it will be different. Your priorities might be different, but the key things really are, you first have to figure out what that product is going to be, right? So the way you figure that out is either you figure out a market gap, an opportunity, you go in and try to understand what that is, what your target customers are. So you basically define your product. So you have to have your product definition, have a vision and strategy, and then you work with your program manager and engineering partners to kind of align them really to sell them on this vision, to kind of take that journey with you. And once that's done, you kind of, have a lot of interaction with your PM to kind of execute things, right, on a daily basis, work with, and usually our program managers, is what I'm trying to refer as PMs, are the ones who kind of work closely with the engineering team to kind of make sure things get executed on a day-to-day schedule. And then as a product manager, your goal is trying to take that product, take that MVP, or take that pilot, or take that full-fledged product and give it to your customers, right? You give it to your customers, you get their feedback, you bring that back to some of your team members. You figure out what your go-to-market strategy is. You work with different organizations like legal to make sure that you're in compliance. You do your security reviews to make sure you're adhering to all the right practices. Kind of, again, you go and you're a seller too, right? As a CEO, you're kind of wearing different hats. So you are a person who's strategizing, working with the customers, working across orgs, and also then sharing that product out there. So you're doing all the marketing or working with marketing teams if your org is big enough or company is big enough to have those resources. So I would think of product manager as somebody who's involved end to end. With the inception of an idea to actual execution and delivery of a product and taking it to the market. But there are some aspects of it that you're going to be more deeply involved than others.
Thank you. Yeah. So, like coming into this role, sort of, what was your background, and then, what kind of made you decide to kind of pursue product management as a track?
Yeah. So I got lucky. I got recruited by Microsoft when I was in college. So I was interning at Microsoft. I did this Explore internship. So if folks are in college right now and considering interning and not sure about if they want to go into product management roles or like software engineering roles, Microsoft has this internship called Explore internship, where I got to experience both during college and try to figure out what I enjoyed. And there were different aspects of what I enjoyed as a product manager and as a software engineer. I came back and started as a software engineer at Microsoft, and I really enjoyed it. But I soon realized that with software engineering, I was getting a depth into one problem. So I would work on one problem for a considerable amount of time and move on to the next challenge. But I felt very siloed, and given my personality, I like interacting a lot more with people. I like looking at broader picture. I like working in breadth rather than always in depth. So that's how I kind of took that transition to a product manager. And I took that route where I became a product manager for the same product that I was working as a software engineer in. That kind of helped with the transition because I didn't have any product management or business background. So I did a computer science degree, and I started as a software engineer. And then while I was working as a software engineer at Microsoft, I did that transition to a product manager. It kind of helped because I didn't have all the soft skills needed. I didn't have the tech skills that kind of really helped me as a product manager, but it's a completely different set of skills that you need for a product manager than you need for a software engineer. So I took that transition because I wanted to kind of have a broader picture, work with different orgs, have a lot more collaboration in terms of product strategy and vision and setting the vision for our product.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. You kind of move from, and that's interesting too, right? Like on the same product, you move from software engineering to product management. So, and I think this is something that kind of comes up, pretty quite often when people are trying to make that career transition. Trying to figure out what the right role for them is, trying to choose between these different tracks, and then there's people coming from different backgrounds. So maybe if, and maybe like Omar can start off with this, if you can talk about, if people are looking to make this transition, what would you recommend they do? How do they sort of transition into this role?
Right, for engineering manager, I would say you still need a reasonable, like a few years of experience doing software engineering yourself before you can transition into that role. And I think that comes as a prerequisite. I know Alishba was talking about being able to transition from software engineer to product management. That I think you can relatively do quicker than going through an engineering management role. Part of it is that while there's equivalence of what an IC role is to a manager, most of those equivalence in companies happen at a senior role. So let's say you're I don't know, like just hypothetically speaking, there's software engineer or senior software engineer or principal software engineer. and generally what you would see is that at senior or principal, that's where you're able to transition into a management role. So you would need to spend a few years honing your skills of actually software development, as well as leading a project or mentoring other people before you can transition into that role. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely does. So you talk about like, how like as part of, I think, your current role, you started taking up some of those management roles as well. So how did that kind of like look for you? Did you start being more
That's a good, right? I think again, like this goes back to like similar things. So basically, you talk to your manager and say that this is something that I'm interested in, and that's where your manager is basically kind of responsible for your career growth. So they're gonna create a setup where you can do this, which is basically they'll create a project or place where you are mentoring some people, guiding the trajectory of the project as well, and helping other engineers learn and grow within their role. And I think like that creates a good smooth transitions, most like commonly known as a tech lead path in the company. So basically you, once you start getting into that kind of role, that gives you some, I would say, early idea of what that role is as well, and helps you evaluate whether it's a good fit for you or not. There's still some aspects of it that you do not get in the tech lead role, like like specifically, let's say, performance management. You do not get to go through the formal process of evaluating someone or giving them guidance on how can they improve themselves. But there's a bunch of things that you can experience while being an IC or individual contributor, as we call it, and have a smoother transition.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think like one thing to call out, I know a lot of people are looking for getting into this to some training programs and doing some engineering management courses. That really is not what I've seen at least work in most companies. You really have to go through the whole software engineering route and grow up the chain before you can get into a management role.
Mm-hmm. Great. And like, do you, as part of your job, like as part of like your role right now, do you still write code? Are you just doing management?
So, like in my current personal state, I don't write code or review code. But when I switched to engineering management, initially I used to continue writing code and also review code. Like over the time, I've actually phased it out. I enjoy writing code still, but it's just that like with the current team setup, it's relatively hard to directly participate into this. I do look at some of the progress on the technical side as well as we are working on different projects, but I'm not able to contribute to each and every project or thing that is going on in the company. Having said that, like at least within Facebook, there's different kind of roles in engineering management as well. Um, we we broadly divide the engineering management role into two different sets. One is called org leader, and the other is called TLM, which is a tech lead manager. And if you choose a tech lead manager path, you generally have a smaller team size, but then you directly contribute to writing code or system design or like doing more technical stuff, which is kind of a, I would say, hybrid between an individual contributor and engineering manager.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I like that. I was like, I phased it out over time. That's interesting. So Sheeba, sort of moving to you. Can you like, can you like kind of tell us about, what are people's normally background coming into program management, and then, if they are looking to make that transition, what are those roles that some people are currently doing, and then they transition into program management, and then how do they, how should they kind of go about that?
Sure. So I think it's a combination of things. It's basically skills, having the right attitude, the personality, just making sure that what you want to do, where you want to end up, how your personality aligns with the cultural fit of the company. Skills is the easier part, right? Skills can be acquired. There are many organizations out there who provide project management trainings. Now there are a lot of certifications you can get into. PMP certification. There's Agile. There's Scrum. There are colleges out there that offer small courses. Like a year-long course or something as well. As I said, that's the easier part. But there's no shortcut. You can't just do a certification and say now I'm qualified enough to just become a program manager. There's a progression. For me, it started, with my first full-time role, which I got lucky with, but it was more geared towards system analyst. And from there onward, I got into business analyst role, which is kind of a very organic progression. So if you are looking for getting into project management side of things, you like um, being in front of people because it does require a lot of interaction with the people. Start working on your skills at the same time. Look for roles which require you to be on the system analysis and design side. If you are already working in a team, try and get into a lead role. I see a lot of times people from test engineering team, QA team, all these different, even engineering teams, they want to transition to program management. And a lot of time you need to be in some sort of a little bit lead experience before you can do that, just because, it ensures that you've been exposed to managing people and interacting with them and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I think that really helps. So like you talked about before you were doing like business analyst work, and then I think you've held like a program manager position. Then now you're like an engineering program manager. So can you maybe talk like a bit about what the difference there is, and then why did you choose to make that transition?
Sure. I think this is like a very organic progression. I don't think that it was something which was very much consciously, I took on. Um, being being having a technical background, back in the days we used to have just plain vanilla computer science discipline. Now there are so many disciplines available. You can get into gaming and cybersecurity and analytics and all that. And there were very limited choices available as well in terms of job placement. Hence, I got lucky and started, with this position, which is called system analyst. I also think that different organizations just label these jobs with different titles. Some companies call it engineering program manager just because you are supporting an engineering team. In some organizations, they call it TPMs, technical program managers. The difference between a program and a technical program manager is just that, we all do project management. You have to move an apartment, you're essentially doing project management, lining up all the tasks and making sure your lease is ready and there are movers and packers involved and there's a timeline involved. And of course, there's this desired outcome involved. So we all do program management. A person who's overseeing construction of a site is also a program management. But technical program management has to do with an organization or team which is delivering a technical project manager, and you're providing technical oversight to it. So I think it's just different titles being used, and if you look into the role description, again, there you will see a little bit variation if you go from company to company. Some companies require you to have at least 30% or 40% of technical domain knowledge to be able to program manage that technical project. But I can assure you this, that in this role, you will not be designing or solution you're not creating a solution delivery basically out of that project. You are still providing the oversight for making sure that it's a successful project.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of like one of the like common, I feel like confusions or maybe like challenges that does happen is understanding how these roles vary across companies, because it's like differently labeled across different companies. So Alishba, sort of kind of moving to you, you moved from software engineering to product management, and then you talked about how you transitioned within your team. But then after that, do you feel, for product management, is it like a role that you took on and then, you were kind of able to just go along with it? Or did you self-study? Have you been, do you like consider taking any specialized training for it to understand those different, that different knowledge that came with product management?
Yeah. So when I transitioned, given that I transitioned my team, it was a lot easier because I knew a lot of people. So I I was easily able to approach people and get some mentorship and understanding. So it was a ramp up period for me for sure. Took me 3 to 6 months to even just get down basic, like how do you even make a PowerPoint that doesn't put people to sleep, right? Like even those skills I had to kind of pick up. But then I'm currently in business school. So I realized that even though I have the tech skills and I was able to learn at the job, most of the skills that I needed, I still felt that a formal education in business and management would help. So I started a part-time MBA. So that's how I'm able to like supplement my tech skills with formal education. Now I would say it's not necessary. I think I can still do my job given that I've been in product management for a decent enough time that I have been at, have covered all the product life cycles. But I just felt that that's something that would help me. So it's not a necessity to have a business degree, but that's how I kind of try to, just kind of progress and learn more skills as a product manager by supplementing with some formal education.
Do you hear noise or okay? Things fine now. Sorry. Yes, it's kind of like building on that. There like I think I've seen this often, like when people are trying to transition to product management. There's this decision between choosing to self-study or getting a formal education. So did you consider self-studying too at one point, or why did you feel like it was like more important to get like a formal education?
So when I transitioned, again, it was a lot of just trying to understand what that role is. And as most people are, I was very confused what that entails. Because whoever you ask, they'll tell you a different answer. Or, because again, your product life cycle is so huge, especially at these organizations, that depending on when you join that team, your roles and responsibilities are going to be very different or very focused on one aspect rather than the other, right? So I've definitely did a lot of research. Given I had already worked or interned as a product manager, I had some insight. So I did have some skills. Definitely took some training. So like one of the trainings I would recommend, which I think was great, was moneyballing. It was essentially training that gives you a tool set to how you ask the right questions to a customer, right? So I think the goal of that training really is to tell you to not ask leading questions. Leading question would be something like, wouldn't it be great if we had like background for our video call, which, because you're already kind of leading with an answer, like, of course, yeah, that's what the interviewer wants to hear. So the customer would mostly oblige. But if you give like an open-ended question, like, what would you like to have, when you're video calling with your friends, what's the feature that you would enjoy, and kind of see where the thought process for that customer goes and kind of follow them along there. That's the kind of training that kind of teaches you to ask the right question. So some trainings like that, where I just learned how to like interact with customers. I did another training, which helps you become a better presenter. So, how you have to stand, where you kind of focus, where you kind of take pauses. So small trainings like that, I kind of augmented with, but it was a lot of hands-on work that I was doing day in, day out that kind of helped me ramp up and understand what that role really entails and build those core skill set. Again, product management, I don't feel I needed a formal education or MBA for it. But again, that's something that I chose to do. I had time, I was interested enough, so I thought I would pursue that. But now that I've gone through that MBA process, I don't think that was a requirement for me to succeed at my job or as a product manager. It was just something good to have. So I kind of, I enjoy learning, so I thought I would kind of do, make good use of my time.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's pretty helpful. So, with like kind of the pandemic happening, and then kind of everything going remote. So, and your roles involve like a lot of management and like people interaction. So how has that COVID kind of affected your work or your roles? I think Omar, if you want to get sorry.
Sure. So obviously, like part of it is VC, which we're doing right now as well. I think like that's like one of the key things that we depend on very heavily, as opposed to what we used to do previously. I think like, so for me specifically, I already have like teams which are remote, so I don't have like all of my team locally in Menlo Park or like in the California office. So we are already using quite a bit of VC, and like part of the teams are in Seattle and New York that I work with. Um, what that meant is that we already had to switch to a model where we're trying to make sure that how to keep everyone in the loop and connected and working in I would say collaboration together. But there were a lot of things that we could do in advance, right? Like you go grab a lunch, then you see people along the way. If you're walking around in the office, you have some chit chat. Similarly, if you want to hold a meeting at another office, you just travel over there and do it. And those things went away very, very quickly. So you have to think about what are the alternate ways that you could do it. Some of the things that we started within the team is that we would set up some game or sometime we play just board games with each other or just have open chat. We do some live Q&A sessions similar to this, like basically every week the leadership team just sits together and we just hold a session with the whole team where they can ask questions and discuss things. We have to check in very much more on the health of the team as well, because when you're when you're seeing people in person, you kind of get to know them and how things are going on, or feel some of the changes. With this, you have to kind of put an extra step into finding out what they're troubling with. One other change similarly initially was to help people settle into this so that they have good setup at home, whether it's their internet connection or hardware or like video chat equipment. So different things to get them into place where they can get comfortable with. So there's few changes that we've made, but I think like overall it's working out fairly well. It has helped us streamline a bunch of different things too. We've reduced some of the meetings. We've made some of these meetings much more efficient. When you're in the room, people are often cross-talking and doing other things with this. There's only one person talking. So you have to kind of moderate it and run it much more efficiently. People have tried to move some conversations into offline threads as well. So I think like some of it has actually pushed us to do more, to become much more efficient.
Yeah, I think like crosstalk and all that is definitely like a problem in like a lot of team meetings. It definitely makes it more difficult. So what about you, Shiva? What kind of challenges have you been facing, and how have you adapted?
So something similar to what Umar described. I think initially it took a little bit of time to get everyone comfortable that this is going to be the new norm, and it did require a lot of people upgrading their internets and a lot of Q&A, which still continues, on a bi-weekly basis, just to check in from the management side, try to give everyone visibility as to where are we heading. Because if this lockdown was for a certain period of time, things would have been easier. The uncertainty causes a lot of confusion and anxiety. So I think that check-in helps kind of stay connected and ask the right questions and all that. Besides that, we do a daily check-in just to see how things are progressing. And I think that's the first thing we do with the team is, what happened yesterday, what's going to be the focus today. A lot of one-on-ones, which we used to have in person, and in Bay Area, this is this culture of having one-on-one. We have sort of cut down on that. We have merged a lot of one-on-ones. So if I'm having a one-on-one with my engineering manager and a design producer, sometimes we have like a three-way one-on-one. So we can just save up on time. And communication through Slack, that is never ending because everybody needs something from you. So we're trying to see how to basically effectively manage that. We have tried to have some quiet times during the week where there are no meetings. So basically you can catch up and you can just, if you need to go talk to a person, you can step away and do that. We're resilient, so we're trying to work towards this new norm.
What about Alishba? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would echo both of what Sheeba and Omar said. I'll also say the phrase "Can you hear me?" is the most used phrase I've heard on my meetings. People are always on mute. That's a new thing. turning on camera I feel like I'm suddenly shy to turn on camera, whereas people would see me all the time anyway. But I guess you have to, because that's just the new normal. You just converse over video. But yeah, I think it has some upsides and downsides. Obviously, I miss human interaction. I think all of us do with lockdown, but I miss, like, working, collaborating with my team on, whiteboards and grabbing coffee or going for walks and your one-on-ones. But the upside is that, again, the same idea with the meetings being more productive. You're kind of coming in and out. We also started doing no meetings Wednesdays. So you guys get some focus time, because now you don't have those hallway conversations. Now every conversation needs to be scheduled on your calendar, even if it's like a 15-minute thing. So I think those are some things I miss, but I think it's good because I feel, at least now that I have lesser number of distractions in person, I'm more focused, get more things done. I think people also feel internal pressure to just be more productive, given we're in lockdown. It's good and bad, but they're definitely different. But I see that a lot of people are getting adjusted to the new reality.
Yeah, for sure. So change for everyone. Omar, I think we have a question for you. So from the audience. So it's someone asking that they've been a freelancer in software engineering for 3 years, and is it too early to transition to software project management role? They're currently interviewing, so they're like, if you have any advice that you would like to share.
I think again, like, it varies by like people's situation as well. But 3 years seems like a reasonable time to be able to do this, assuming that you've learned sufficient skills. I think like part of this is that what your experience has been, what kind of focus you've been driving, and whether you've been trying to build those skills. But it seems like a reasonable time to get to try this. I think like part of this thing, like especially when you're going to interview, do think about, at least in large companies over here, you have to prepare for the interview. That means look up in what skills you need or what kind of questions get asked, and prepare for it aggressively. And you learn, like, you build actually skills while preparing for that interview too. So definitely encourage doing that if you're looking for that kind of role.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And we have another question. So I'm a computer science graduate and looking to move into marketing analytics. So is it better to change your field at that point where you're just a fresh graduate? So I think maybe this is relevant for either Sheeba or Alishba, if you want to take that up.
Yeah, I can start off, and Sheeba, feel free to chime in. You can really transition to any role that you want anytime in life. You just have to be motivated enough to get the right skill set. It's harder, obviously, at certain points to transition, and you have to spend some time developing those skills. But I would say, since you're right out of fresh grad, a lot of people are going to be willing to give you a shot in different roles. So I think now is a great time to follow whatever career path that kind of interests you and kind of aligns with your passion, and make sure that you can demonstrate that with some internships or some projects on your, so you can actually get that foot in the door. Because if you don't have the skill set that you developed from college, which you can use at the job, you can obviously, show that or showcase that in a different way, and sort of supplement your resume with those relevant skill set for the job you're wanting, right? So I'll always say that you're never too late. You can always, find the right approach, right trainings or right skill set, and develop that into your next role.
Mm-hmm. Sheeba, would you like to add anything?
I agree. Analytics, I think keep the focus on data analytics. Don't be too much focused on, just looking for marketing analyst roles, or any or organization where you can try and get an internship or summer job. That's going to be very helpful, because when you're actually working in a field, it gives you a lot of exposure to real life problems and how things are done, and that helps get clarity on if this is really what I want to do, or if this is how I envisioned it. So I would definitely recommend, trying to get a little bit of exposure to that if possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like learning through kind of getting that exposure and practice definitely helps understand things better. So Umar, we have another question for you. How do you coach people on giving estimates? I know it's a tough thing to do and lots of engineers struggle with it, but any tips that have worked well for you?
Right, that's a good, interesting because I've been an engineer too, and I think like one of the things that, especially being an engineer, I think we get challenged with is we're often very optimistic about when we'll deliver things and how quickly it can get done. So definitely try to remove that bias when you're giving that estimate. But thinking about what techniques help with it, like the first and foremost is breaking down the problem to think about what are the sequences that you'll go through. Like, okay, I'll need to build it, then I get this to either to some testing function or to dog food, or how do I collect feedback, how do I iterate on it, what does help me verify it. So I think like breaking it down into smaller parts, thinking about what are the dependencies between them, if you're dependent on some other external team within your team, what code can get written in parallel versus what needs to be done in a sequence. So those are like generally the things that help quite a bit. The other way is to think about um, if you built something similar in past, and then you can use that as a benchmark or a yardstick in some ways as well to estimate time. So but it comes with experience. Having said that, is like especially like if we think about within our team or company as well, what we expect is that senior engineers help out other people understand how to estimate different kind of things, and like part of it is definitely experience that you would need to have to be able to estimate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So I think we've talked a lot about your current roles and then trying to understand, what they entail. And it's been really helpful. So, what do you feel are sort of like the next steps for, all of you, like the roles that you're in? What are the growth opportunities that are available to you? And then, some directions that you can kind of grow into going forward.
Where do you want to start?
Anyone? You can go ahead, Umar, I guess, and then, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think like this is one thing I would say we have. I think we're in a very good place in larger companies that there's a lot of different growth paths available, regardless of what your interest and experience is. I think like especially if I think about an engineering space, like I was talking about earlier, there's paths for people to grow in as individual contributor, like ICs with no reports or anything. Like you can be a software engineer and go up to similar level as a VP or wherever you want to get to. So that's like one thing that I think is kind of a luxury that is available in larger companies, and I think like that creates a lot of ability to find a role which is very kind of custom fit to what your strengths are. But as I said, there's different roles available within engineering management too. You can go more tech lead path or org lead path. For myself, I've been following the organizational lead path, and that's helping me um, get to where I am today. I think like if we go further, there's like obviously levels up there, going to director and VP into this, which basically means taking on much more scope than I do right now.
Mm-hmm. Sheeba, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think it a lot depends on what you want to do. Um, for me, working on a challenging project, maybe which is broader in scope, have high customer impact or visibility, that could be a very challenging project for me. And looking at the title may remain the same, but there are gazillion opportunities out there to work for different teams, different organizations, different projects. If you're working on building a car, for example, it's a huge undertaking, and every job, every project offers a lot of learning capabilities. So I think for me to be able to engage on a project, it's very important as to what the project has to offer. If you are a kind of person who likes climbing the ladder and going up, this particular role offers a lot of that as well. You can grow yourself into a lead for the PMO. Many organizations they have fully established program management organization, so you can essentially manage other EPMs or PPMs. This role, although it's an IC role, because you have, you're basically working in a very matrix environment. You still have the capability to grow into a director or a VP level role, which is essentially equivalent to CEO role. So many opportunities available. It just depends on what you think is the right path for you.
Right. What about you, Alishba?
I would echo the same. With any large company, we do have the path to kind of go up as an individual contributor IC role, or you have the path to kind of become a product manager or manager, which basically manages a bunch of product managers, right? And you kind of go up that role all the way to a CEO. So really depends on what you're interested in. I would say that similar idea. I enjoy working in sort of a startup agile environment. So both the teams that worked in Microsoft so far have been very startup kind of teams where it was like working in with the resource of a big company. So you're getting a paycheck, but at the same time you're kind of building an idea from scratch and kind of taking that on. So this is my second time doing that within Microsoft. So I think that's something I get excited about. So I see myself doing a lot more of this, kind of birthing an idea and kind of taking it all the way to the users. So I see myself doing more of that as I progress.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So I think we have a very interesting question from the audience. So, which is kind of like, I think, resonant on like this debate going on about how going remote is going to affect like working across borders. So we have a question on, if your jobs end up becoming remote permanently, would you be open to the idea of living in Pakistan, maybe for a year or so? Or if you want to take that up and then go around.
I think that's definitely a good, interesting idea. Part of what, while I think we have to decouple, remote, obviously it gives us a lot of freedom or flexibility, but at the same time, the time zone does play a very important role in this. So I think given the current role, it's relatively hard for me to operate from a different time zone, because that would just flip days and nights for me. But if there's a different kind of position, I think that could be more interesting to think about, to relocate to Pakistan. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that it's not just the work constraint. I think it's about personal preferences as well, where you want to live and how you want to there's always pros and cons of being living in US compared to Pakistan. You want to live closer to family and friends and where you grow up. There's a lot of emotional attachment to different things as well, but there's different advantages living in US as well. So I think part of if you think about my current role, even if it becomes remote, it won't have enough flexibility for me to operate completely in a different time zone.
For sure, yeah. If you've been in a place for too long, there's definitely a lot more things to consider. Do you have anything to add, Sheeba or Alishba?
Yeah, I think I have the same feelings as Umar. In my past roles, I worked with a lot of offshore teams as well, and there was a time in my life when I was working for Xerox. My day would start at 6:30 a.m. because I was reporting to an office in Belgium, and some of the offshore teams were in India and some other parts of the world, and it felt like my day never ended, because from 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. I would be on calls and all that. So time difference does play a very important role, because if you want to maintain quality of life. So I don't know, just working remote gives us the ability to relocate to Pakistan or not.
For sure.
No, I love the idea of working remotely from a different country and from Pakistan, but same issues. Too many meetings, it will just flip my life upside down. But if I was a software engineer in my last role, definitely think that would have been a possibility, because I have much less meeting and I can focus and work and deliver on my own time and just maybe do 1 or 2 meetings. And we do that, right? We do work with remote teams and kind of schedule it at the end of their day or early in their day and kind of work that out. If it's 1 or 2 meetings, it's doable, but my calendar is full of meetings. So I don't think anybody will see me. Yeah.
Yeah, schedules like definitely really important when it comes to that. So just kind of like going out, like what do you guys find to be the most exciting or fun, and then also the most challenging parts of the jobs or roles you're in? Or if you want to go.
Okay. I think the exciting part is like the people management aspect of what I do. Definitely, I think like understanding how people are different, what in terms of what their strengths are, what their needs are. I think like that to me is very very interesting. Working closely with people and helping them grow in their career. Um, the challenges I would say come from. More into thinking about like especially part of being a large organization, it like a lot of challenges come into play in what I think like Sheeba was touching on as well, is influencing different teams that you're working with, whether they're partner engineering teams or other functions. I think like especially while I know like the concept of authority exists in other places, but like in most larger companies right now, you have to kind of lead with objective reasoning and how you got to it. Think about principles, think about vision, or like common like establish common ground on what people agree on, like what they want to achieve, and then backtrack from that this is how you achieve it. So I think like that's like one of the most interesting and challenging part in my current role.
What about you, Alishba?
I think what I personally find the most fun is kind of creating that product definition, right? What that product is, talking to customers. That's always exciting. I love like rolling out new features to customers and see them all excited. It kind of gives you a sense of accomplishment there. Gets you excited about your product and what you're bringing next to the table. I think the challenging part again is you have a lot of dependencies on other teams to deliver, so you can deliver on time. Those are not fun. A lot of those conversations are not fun. I think one of the tough things is you need to learn when to escalate and hold people accountable. So those are always the constraining relationships. So you have to learn how to do it the right way and don't make it personal, but make it about, customers and product and what you're trying to deliver there and what kind of business impact you're trying to drive. So those are a bit challenging conversations. But other than that, it's usually good. Rarely I have to ever do that, but you have to be very strategic when you do this.
What about you, Sheeba?
I think the exciting part is when your project that you've been working on actually gets launched, because you're involved, right from the onset when product or the item from the roadmap becomes available, gets confirmed for a release, and you're working on requirements gathering. So you move from blueprint to a more specific requirement and create traceability around it. It's very very fulfilling after going through a ton of roadblocks and risks and managing those items to be able to see the feature actually launched. And the challenging part is as you're dealing with so many people and personalities, it's exciting as well as it is challenging as well. And as Alishba touched on it, you need to master the art of having awkward conversations. The sooner you learn it, the better. It doesn't mean that you have to boss around or whatever. As a program manager, you need to be able to put your ego on the side and think about the success of the project and how to align people. But it requires a lot of times having awkward conversations just to make sure you push the project to the finish line.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we're almost at the end of our session's time. So before we kind of end, does anyone have any like closing thoughts they would like to add, or anything they'd want to share?
I think like while I know like people are often thinking about what role I get into, I would definitely think about what your own passion is, what you want to do. and at least in most companies, the role kind of gets tailored to your needs versus thinking about where do I fit. Like while we talk about what does engineering manager mean or product manager means, even within the company, if you take like 10 engineering managers, they would be doing 10 different things or would have quite a bunch of variety in how they're operating as well. So I think like definitely focus more inward than thinking about what the expectation is.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Sheeba, Alishba, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to tell people here because I often see, especially young people who are coming into this field, don't get tangled into titles. I see a lot of time people are just running after, I want to be this or I want to be this level by this time. In my mind, we need to focus more on what is it that makes you happy, set yourself goals. And personally, I've seen that every time I set myself a goal, a few years down the road, that goal may or may not be valid. So you need to set yourself goals and then you need to keep revisiting them to see if those are still valid, if those are still achievable, if it still fits, your path as you had envisioned, 3 years ago. And try to make your goals more realistic. Take on opportunities, as many as you can. Get yourself as much exposure as you can. It doesn't matter what company, what team, whatever, your experience is always going to help you, complement you in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with Omar's and Sheba's advice. I think those are great things. One other thing I would add here is the power of networking. I think we tend to not value that as much. I think it's more. I think effective networking would be what I would say, right? So you want to create people who are your sponsors. You obviously want to have mentors, but sponsor who would like vouch for you, who would help you get the next job, right? So all the jobs I've ended up getting after my internship have really been about people I've worked with who vouched for me and said, oh, this person is going to be a great fit for this team and kind of bring me on in these projects. So I think those are really helpful. And I see a lot of people commenting on transitioning, right? So you can transition at any point in your career. I think the key is, especially when you're fresh grad, get your foot in the door, get exposure, because unless you try a role, or unless you're in those shoes, you won't really know what you like. So yes, it might sound like, oh, product management seems fun, or engineering might seem fun as a concept, but unless you try it or get exposure to it, you might find that this is great and this is something you are really passionate about, or you can always find another role within the company or team, and kind of get some exposure to it, shadow people, read about it, or just interview people, or just have conversations. So don't shy away from asking questions, network with people. People love talking to other people. Also, people love talking about their job and what they do. So definitely take those opportunities, especially early on, as you are trying to get your first job or transitioning into a new role. Um, you know, just talk to people. It really helps.
Thank you. That was all really great advice. Thank you for joining for the panel and then sharing your experiences. I think it's been a great learning experience for everyone. Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, Aiza, for hosting this.
Thank you, Aiza, and lovely meeting you all, and thanks for having us on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.